Now that we know that we have our where working fine and also pass where working fine. So I'm not thinking if we're going to make the pass where a private method, because we may not use it outside of the class. So let's make this private. And then we can now continue to the next thing. Okay. All right. So inside of our where clause, we still need to do two things. One will be to actually prepare the query. So we can say the query is going to be equal to this prepare. We don't have the method yet, but we're going to have this shortly. All right. And then right here, we want to prepare, and then we want to say this get query type. This get query. And the query that we get back here will be based on the type of operation. Okay. And then this is where we want to use this operation. All right. So this is pretty much self-explanatory. We have two methods to create here. Okay, so the first one, get query, will take an argument called this operation. Okay, so that will either be select, insert, update, or delete. And then based upon that, it will return the query for us. Okay, we're going to write these two methods right now. So for prepare, this is going to be an abstract method. Why this is going to just be a generic method inside of this class that we can actually abstract to something else later. Okay, so I may want to do that now. So let's just do it here, and then we will arrange it better later. So the first one that we create will be public function get query. And then this would say the type of query that we want to get, type. And this should really be a string, so we're going to protect it a little bit. And then inside of here, we're going to have a switch. So we're going to switch the type, and then we're going to return the appropriate query. Okay, so let's say the first case will be sef DML query type select. So this will be or we could actually make select the default that will be returned if nothing is being specified. But because we have other type of DML operations, let's make this a little bit strict. So and then right here, we're just going to break out. Then in between, we can now begin to just return the query. So we can say return. Let's use sprintf, and then we can write our query inside of here. So our query will be select %s. Okay, so select %s from. We need another %s. And then we also may need a where clause. So where %s. And then we need a comma here. And then we need to pass in the values for all of the %s that we have here. We have 3. So select columns from the name of the table, where, and then the conditions. Okay. So it means we need to pass in 3 different things. So the first one will be this. Feeds. Okay, remember, told you the feeds will be the columns, and then the next one will be this table. Okay, so that will be the property table, and then the final one will be an implode. Okay, so we want to implode the placeholders. We want to implode it with and, because when we write SQL that has more than one where clause, so we have the possibility of more than one where clause, we need to say and this. Okay, so placeholders. So do we really need this method, get placeholders? Or we could just directly use a property. So I'm thinking of removing those methods later because we're never going to use them really outside of the class. And then the next case that we want will be for insert. So let's just grab that and then paste it here. DML insert. And then we need to actually change this. So this will be insert into %s. And then we need to specify the values. So this just means that you need to actually know SQL, okay, to understand really what's going on here. And I believe that if you're following this course, you should already know SQL a bit. And that will be %s. So what we're doing here is really simple. So it's the same way that we'll insert into a table if we write the raw SQL. So what we are doing differently now is that we are substituting, okay, the name of the table for %s because we want to provide it dynamically. We don't know which table you want to insert into, okay? And then also the feeds, which will be the columns, okay, that you want to insert into, we provide it dynamically because we also don't know which feeds, because this can be used for different tables. And then the values are also provided dynamically. So right here, we want to use a comma for insert, and then we want to swap this. Okay, so the first one is table, and then the second one is feeds. Okay, so table, and then the feeds that we want to populate, and then the values which we'll get from the placeholder. And that's all we need to do for insert statement. And then we're going to have one more, or actually two. Okay, so this is going to be for update. And, it will be slightly different too. For update, we just need to know the statement. So this will be update table. Okay, so that will be %s. So for update statement, we say update and then specify the table name, and then we now say set, which is a keyword, set, and then we specify the things that we are setting, and then we need to have a where clause so that all of the rows or all of the table is not being updated. Okay, so update table, set, feed, where, condition. Okay, and that's going to be slightly different too for what we pass in. The first one will be the table. So the second one will be the feeds, but we want to implode the feeds too. Okay, and I will explain that for you shortly. So we want to implode this with a comma. So we're gonna put a comma and a space, and then this feed. And then for here, we want to say and, okay, in case we have more than one conditions that we're using to update. Okay, here is the reason why we are actually imploding this. You know that when you are updating and you say set, it's going to be like this. So I could say set name equal to Terry, comma, okay, report type equal to test, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what we're doing is that we have an array here that would contain the key value pairs. Okay, so let's return this back. So this array feed, when we are doing update, would be like this. So let's say name and then the value. Value will be Terry. Okay, so we just implode this with a comma. So for each element, we implode this with a comma, and then we're going to have what I did previously. And then the last one that we want to do here will be for delete. So let's just take care of all of these, and then we know that we are done. Delete. So this is pretty much straightforward. We just say delete from, and then specify the where clause. Delete from table, then where. Then that's okay. So for this, we only need two things. We don't need the feeds, we need the table, and then the conditions to be in our place order. And then we're going to have a default case. So we're going to say default. It's just to throw an exception because we don't support the other ones now. Throw new missing argument. No, so we probably need a new exception type here. Okay, so we could say bad query, not bad query string actually. Invalid argument exception. Let's use invalid argument exception for now. DML type not supported. Okay, so we have get query. So right now we are able to get a query, and I want to really just move this to a different class. So I want to move this to a trait that we can use inside of this class. So let's come here, and then we're going to create a trait. Let's just call this query, and this will be a trait. Okay, so you should have something like this in the namespace app database, and then a trait called query. And what I want to do is just copy this method that we just wrote. Okay, so I'm going to cut it out, and then I'm going to paste it here. Okay, so I paste this here, and then we can use the trait in our query builder just to make things a little bit cleaner. So right here, I'm going to say use query. Okay, and remember to import query. All right, so look up here. Okay, so we really don't need to import it because they're in the same namespace app database. Okay, so that's cool. So we can now really use this method. So if I do get query now, you can see that I'm able to see it here. Okay, get query, and then we pass it the type of query. So what we want to do here is also for operation, we want to set it to be default to select. So let's say operation should be equal to sef, and then DML type select by default. Okay, so once we do this, we have a query right now, which we can pass in the feeds, but our feed is not equal to anything right now. Okay, so what we can do is to create a new method here called select public function select. Okay, so remember that this was one of the methods that I used in the previous tests, and now we can write a very basic implementation for the select. So we can have a string called the feeds that you want to select from the database. And then that should really just be equal to sef columns by default, so which means we want to select everything by default. Okay, so if the user doesn't pass in the list of columns, okay, comma separated list of columns, then we're just going to default it to be equal to the asterisk, which is everything. And then right here we can now say this operation is equal to sef DML select. Okay, and then the feeds, so we can say this feeds is equal to feeds, and then we can return this. All right, so let's use this in the front end and then see how things work. So what we want to get here will be this query. Okay, so we want to get this query, and the way that we can really get that is to do a little trick. So let's do a little trick and say query. Okay, we're going to also get rid of this. Let's say protected, or let's just say public query. Okay, so that I don't need to create a different method for this. Public query should be equal to nothing. Okay, and then right here in my where. Okay, so where do we have where? Right here. Could make this query. Okay, so last thing that we really need to do here is to actually execute the query. We don't have the prepared method yet, and we also don't have execute yet. So I think we can safely for now just use this. I'll come back and change it, okay? And then let's come back to our test case. Then let's move the binding test a little bit further. So we want to specify a table. So let's start by say table. And then we also want to say select, okay? Which is basically what we have previously. We have this already somewhere, so maybe we can run that test, okay? So let's come down here and see the one that we can use. So we have the one that's a table, and then select everything where ID is equal to 1, and then we don't have this method called first. But let's run this test. So in this test, we are going to just see the query. So let's var_dump result query, okay? And then we can actually exit. Okay, so let's get rid of this for now. We already know that our bindings are working, and we can really just get rid of this. And now I want to run only this test, okay? So this is a test that we want to run. Let's and after we run this test, we want to exit. So let's come to the command line and then run the test. And then here you can see the query, okay? So we can see here, select star or asterisk from reports where ID is equal to question mark. So this is the query, okay? This is how the query is going to be passed in through to the prepare statement of either PDO or MySQLi. And after we prepare it, then we can then execute, which is what we're going to do next now.